Sacrifice required. The group gathered in the library, the weight of the crypt's revelations hanging heavily in the air. Emily sat at the long wooden table, Michael Shaw's journal open in front of her. Its yellowed pages were filled with cryptic scrawls and dark incantations, each one more chilling than the last. "We're missing something," Maggie said, pacing back and forth. Her voice was steady, but her clenched fists betrayed her tension. "The portal is sealed, and Isabella's fury has been calmed, but the curse hasn't been broken. The castle is still alive." Emily ran her fingers over the page, her heart sinking as she read Michael's final entry again. "The bloodline binds the seal, but the seal demands balance. A life for a life, a soul for a soul. It's here," Emily said quietly, her voice trembling. Michael wrote it down. "The curse demands a sacrifice. That's the only way to end it." Liam froze, his face pale. "A sacrifice? You mean one of us has to die?" "Not necessarily die," Maggie said, stopping in her tracks. "But one of us has to stay, to become part of the castle, bound to it like the others." Alice shot to her feet, her voice rising. "You can't be serious. We've been through hell trying to survive this place. And now you're saying we have to volunteer to stay here forever." "It's not about what we want," Emily said, her eyes fixed on the journal. "It's about what the curse demands, the spirit's warning." As if in response to Emily's words, the room grew colder. The flickering candlelight dimmed, and a faint whisper filled the air, growing louder until it formed a single, mournful word. "Choose." The group froze, their breaths visible in the frigid air. The whisper was unmistakable, Isabella's voice, filled with sorrow and urgency. The library's walls seemed to close in, the weight of the castle's presence pressing down on them. "This is insane," Alice said, backing away from the table. "There's no way we're doing this. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Maggie said, her tone firm. "This has been the truth all along. The spirits are bound to the castle because Michael never paid the price himself. The balance was never restored." Emily stared at the journal, her mind racing. "If we don't do this, the curse will remain. More people will be drawn here. More lives will be lost. It won't stop." The debate. Liam leaned against the wall, his hands running through his hair. "This isn't fair. None of us signed up for this. Why should any of us have to pay for what Michael did?" Maggie turned to him, her expression somber. "Because we're here. Because we've uncovered the truth. That makes it our responsibility." "And what if we don't choose?" Alice demanded. "What if we all leave? What happens then?" The whisper returned, louder this time, its tone filled with warning. "The curse will spread." Emily shuddered, the weight of the words settling over her. "It won't just stay here," she said, her voice barely audible. "It'll follow us. It'll consume everything. A painful decision." The room fell silent as the group processed the gravity of the situation. Emily glanced around at her friends, her heart aching at the thought of losing any of them. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'll stay," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "What?" Alice said, her eyes widening. "No, absolutely not. It has to be me," Emily said, meeting her gaze. "I'm the one tied to the Shaw bloodline. This is my family's curse. If anyone deserves to be here, it's me." "That's not fair," Liam said, stepping forward. "We're all in this together. You don't have to do this alone." Emily shook her head. "Yes, I do. If I don't, the curse won't be broken. The spirits won't rest. A selfless act." Maggie placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, her eyes filled with both sadness and pride. "You're brave," she said. "But this is more than bravery. It's sacrifice." Emily nodded, her throat tightening. "If it ends the curse, it's worth it." Alice shook her head vehemently, tears streaming down her face. "No, there has to be another way. We'll figure it out. We'll." "There's no time," Maggie said softly. "The castle won't wait." Emily stepped away from the table, her resolve hardening. "Then let's do this. The ritual of binding." The group returned to the crypt, the oppressive atmosphere heavier than before. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, the faint scent of lavender mingling with the earthy smell of stone and decay. Emily knelt in the center of the platform, the journal open before her. Maggie stood beside her, carefully drawing a circle of salt and iron filings around the perimeter. Alice and Liam stood nearby, their expressions a mixture of fear and helplessness. "Are you sure about this?" Liam asked, his voice trembling. Emily nodded, her hand steady as she lit the candles around the platform. "This is the only way." Maggie began chanting in a low, steady voice, her words echoing through the crypt. The runes on the platform glowed faintly, their light pulsing in time with the rhythm of her chant. The air grew colder, and the shadows on the walls began to shift, coalescing into the faint outlines of the spirits bound to the castle. The spirits appear. Lady Isabella's form emerged first, her translucent figure flickering like a dying flame. She stood at the edge of the circle, her sorrowful gaze fixed on Emily. "You would give your life for ours?" she asked, her voice filled with both awe and despair. Emily met her gaze. "If it sets you free, yes." One by one, the other spirits appeared. Evelyn, her small form trembling with fear. Lady Eleanor, her skeletal figure wrapped in the tattered remains of her wedding gown. And countless others, their faces etched with anguish. "You are brave," Isabella said, her voice breaking. "But you are also kind. You honor us with your sacrifice." The binding completed, the chanting reached its climax, the light from the runes intensifying until the crypt was bathed in an otherworldly glow. The spirits began to dissolve, their forms fading into the light as the runes pulsed one final time. Emily felt a strange warmth wash over her, a sense of peace unlike anything she'd ever known. She closed her eyes, letting the light envelop her. When she opened them again, she was alone, a new guardian. The crypt was silent, its oppressive energy replaced with an eerie stillness. Emily stood at the center of the platform, her form faintly translucent. The journal lay at her feet, its pages blank, its purpose fulfilled. The curse was broken, but she was bound to the castle, her soul tethered to its walls. For the first time in centuries, Ballygally Castle was at peace. Connor's descent. The survivors gathered in the castle's library, their breaths shallow as they processed Emily's sacrifice. Her absence was a raw wound, her final moments replaying in their minds. Though the heart had been destroyed, the oppressive atmosphere of the castle had not lifted. The air was thick, vibrating faintly with an energy none of them could define. Connor sat apart, his head in his hands, silent since they had fled the crypt. Maggie watched him closely, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. The shadows around him seemed darker, more alive, and every now and then, a faint flicker of green light danced in his sunken eyes. "Connor," Maggie ventured, her voice cautious. "We need to move. The castle, it's not finished with us." Connor didn't respond. Liam stepped forward, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. "Come on, mate," he said, reaching out to touch Connor's shoulder. The reaction was instant. Connor's head snapped up, his eyes burning with an unnatural green light. He shoved Liam back with a strength that sent him sprawling. "Connor," Alice whispered, her voice trembling. But it wasn't Connor who responded. The voice that came from his lips was layered, ancient, and filled with malice. "You thought it was over," the entity sneered. "Emily's sacrifice was a start, but the castle is far from done." The group stumbled back as Connor rose to his feet, his movements jerky and unnatural. Shadows coiled around him, feeding on the energy of the castle. The deadly chase. Connor's possessed form lunged at Liam first, his speed and strength inhuman. Liam barely dodged, scrambling to his feet as the library descended into chaos. Books flew from the shelves, and the once dim chandelier overhead flared with a sickly green light. "Run!" Maggie screamed, shoving Alice toward the door. The group scattered, fleeing into the labyrinthine halls of Ballygally Castle. Connor pursued them relentlessly, his laughter echoing through the corridors, filled with malice and mockery. Alice and Liam darted down a narrow staircase, their flashlights casting frantic beams of light that did little to penetrate the oppressive darkness. Behind them, Connor's footsteps thundered, growing louder with every second. The shadows around him seemed to extend, clawing at the walls as though the castle itself was hunting them. Maggie, separated from the others, clutched a handful of protective charms from her bag. She ducked into a small alcove, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She traced a quick protective sigil on the wall with a piece of chalk, hoping to slow Connor down. But the sound of his laughter told her it wouldn't be enough. Evelyn's aid. Just as Connor cornered Alice and Liam in a dead-end corridor, a faint glow appeared behind him. Evelyn's spirit materialized, her small form trembling but resolute. "Stop this," she said, her voice soft but firm. Connor hesitated, the green light in his eyes flickering as the shadows recoiled from Evelyn's presence. "You cannot interfere," the entity snarled through him, but there was a crack in its voice, a sign of weakness. "You've taken enough," Evelyn said, stepping forward. She raised her hand, and a bright light radiated from her small frame, pushing the darkness back. Connor screamed, collapsing to his knees as the green light drained from his eyes. For a moment, he was himself again, his face filled with horror at what he had done. "I'm sorry," he whispered before falling unconscious. Evelyn turned to the others, her expression grave. "You need to leave. Now, escape and loss." With Connor unconscious, Liam and Maggie carried him as they fled through the castle. Evelyn led the way, her faint glow lighting the path through the crumbling corridors. The castle seemed to resist their escape. Doors slammed shut in their faces, and the walls trembled as though alive. Alice clutched Maggie's arm. "We're not going to make it," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, we will," Maggie replied, though her own doubt was evident. At last, they reached the entrance hall. The massive wooden doors, which had been locked since the curse had awakened, creaked open as Evelyn waved her hand. "Go," she said. "The castle will let you leave, but it won't let you forget." Liam hesitated, glancing back at her. "What about you?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head, her translucent form already beginning to fade. "I'm part of this place," she said. "I always have been." The group hesitated for a moment longer, but the castle groaned, its walls cracking as the shadows surged forward. They had no choice but to run. Haunted lives. Days later, the survivors sat in a small pub in Belfast, the reality of what they had endured weighing heavily on them. Connor, now awake but gaunt and pale, stared into his untouched drink. "She saved us," he said finally. "Evelyn saved us, but we left her there. We didn't have a choice," Maggie said, her tone gentle but firm. "She made her choice long ago, just like Emily did." Alice shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. "I can't stop seeing it," she whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that castle. I can hear the whispers, feel the shadows." "It's not just you," Liam admitted. "I've been dreaming about it too. The castle's still with us, isn't it?" Maggie nodded, her expression grim. "The curse never truly ends. It's tied to us now, to all who escape." The door reopens. Years passed, and Ballygally Castle stood quiet but never forgotten. Locals avoided it, sharing hushed tales of its horrors. But curiosity always found a way to awaken the past. One foggy morning, a group of tourists ventured onto the grounds, drawn by rumors of hauntings and viral videos that had surfaced after the survivors' ordeal. The castle appeared abandoned, its windows shattered and its walls overgrown with ivy. But its presence was as oppressive as ever. Inside, the tourists found the air thick and cold, their laughter and chatter fading as they explored the dark halls. One of them, a young woman, wandered into what had once been the dining hall. She froze as her flashlight illuminated the long table, now pristine and set with gleaming silverware and fresh, steaming food. The others joined her, their confusion turning to unease as faint whispers filled the room. The whispers grew louder, forming words that sent chills down their spines. "Welcome back." The heavy doors of the castle slammed shut, and the cycle began anew.